Good evening, my dear friends. Welcome. This is another Saturdays. Thank you for staying with me for today. And if you are looking for any travel channels that give you a lot of images, as well as traveling information involving some historical and geographical backgrounds, my channels is for you. And if you like, please do subscribe, all right, and like and share among your friends and family, so that they can tour virtually the world just like you. Now today we are going to cover another interesting fort, a very outstanding fort in Rajasthan. And this fort is located in the city of Jodhpur. And to give exactly for you have a view of exactly where the city of Jodhpur is, let's first of all look at where Rajasthan is located in India. If you are first time with me, then probably this will be useful for you to have an idea where exactly Rajasthan is located within India. So Rajasthan is just a border to Pakistan at the northwestern side of the India. And you look at the largest map itself, it's exactly the Rajasthan state, Rajasthan, and you can see there's an arrow pointing, and basically this arrow pointing at this city, Jodhpur. And as I have mentioned to you, I'll be sharing 5 of the mega forts and palaces in Rajasthan, and this is actually the 4th episodes, and we are cover a fort that is gigantic fort in this Jodhpur city. And you can see that the location of this fort is shown in this my travel routes where the arrow pointed at. Here is the fort, Mehrangrah Fort. I would like to refer it as a gigantic fort because you look at it, it's beside comparing with a fort, the living fort. I found that actually in terms of size, in terms of height, I think this Mehrangrah Fort should be considered the largest I have visited during my tour to Rajasthan. And there are some very interesting history about this fort. And while going through some images, I would also like to share with you some of the history behind the fort. Interestingly, the fort actually was actually built by the king or the Raja, Rojaha, right? We actually the Raja from Mehrangrah. And when he spotted this rocky hills, which he decided to build his fort, he was strongly against by a sin. And at the time, this hill was also known as the Mountain of Birds. From the name, you know, that means that there's a lot of birds are living in these mountains. So this sin was very, very unhappy, and therefore he is not only strongly against it, he gave a curse to this fort. He said, if the fort were to build on this hill, the fort will suffer shortage of waters. And the king, the Raja, right, will then later on regretted, and he's asked for forgiveness from the saint. The saint accepted the apology, but a curse is been set. So in order to neutralize it, he then suggests that human life must sacrifice a life to neutralize the curse that have given up by him. And then there's one gentleman by the name Raja Rams Menghal offer himself to be sacrificed, to be buried alive, and that was taken place in 1459. And in order to remember his bravery and sacrifice, there's actually a memorial was then built within these forts And it's from there the foundation of this fort was successfully laid. So this is about history about how this fort was started in the 15th century. Now these images will give you an overview of this Mehrangrah Fort. It's a model. You can find it when you visit this Mehrangrah Fort. It's completely built on a rocky hilltop, and it stood well above, close to 125 meters above the city of Jodhpur. Right? And this fort also sometimes as referred as a name Mehrangrah Fort in short, which bear the meaning Sun Fort. Right? And the hill was situated actually in Thar deserts, and overseeing the Jodhpur city, right? Jodhpur city, and it covered an area of close to 5 square kilometer, quite a very big, quite a large area of the fort. The popularity of this fort, of course, I will share with you later and show you some of the images interiorly of this building. But you look at it, the size and the giganticness and the height of this fort, you can see from all these images I'm going to share with you now. When we enter from the gates, they are altogether, there are 7 gates, and you enter gate by gates. And all these gates not only are high and tall, but the walls surrounding the gate are equally very high and tall. And it just as this image, you look at it itself, you can imagine actually we are almost looking at the buildings. Of course, taking into consideration it's built on a hilltop that is almost close to 40-story height. So let's move around with some of these images to give you an overview of how this fort looked like from the surrounding. And this is basically the first gate that we are entering. And the one of the very popular thing that happened and very unique that they always give a name to each of these gate. And in this fort, the name of this gate, every time a gate is built, is a symbolic sign of a victory over a wars. So therefore, all the gates are giving a name. For example, we have this so-called 7 gates, and a few of them are very, very unique. For example, we have one of the gate called Jaipur Gate. This Jaipur Gate is always known as Victoria Gate, right? When it was built by Maharaja Man Singh in 1806 and victory over Jaipur. Then we have also another gate called Fatehpur, which actually a victory over Mungha, right, in 1707. And because of that, over the 5th century, this many war was fought. And you realize actually some of the wall of this palace or of this fort exteriorly still have the bombardment, the impact of the bombardment of the cannonballs. This is some of the temples and memorials that built on this fort. We also, as enter the first gate, these images, the painting that done on one side of the gates. In fact, both sides of the gate, they are painting. And this is one of the painting. And this on the other side of the painting on the gates. So this is all the exterior views of these gigantic forts. We call them Mehrangrah Fort or Mehrangrah Fort. Walking inside the forts and also touring of all the palaces will need some time, and the recommended duration is at least half a day. And there's not many eatery shop or those outlet where you can buy drinks. Therefore, you are recommended visitor to bring along your own drinking waters while visiting this fort. So just look at some of these gigantic forts view from the foothills or at the lower gates. And the building facade is very very unique, and it has very close similarity to some of these architectural facade that we found in the earlier two episodes that I've shared with you. This is another gates that we are passing through. The gates are huge in size, allow the passage of elephants. Elephant been used in war times during the ancient time. There is a cantilever out from the building of the edge, the construction and the decoration below the balcony. Some of the high wall. And as you're moving in, because I told you that there's actually quite a number of so-called palaces, and they're given each palaces as unique names. And one of the, as I said earlier, the main attractions of this fort is actually the intricate carving works, and also the splendid architecture as seen just now from some of the facade of the building. The fort also, because been built over 500 years, 5 century, and therefore during this 5 century during this 500 years, of course the architecture differences are expected, over the different era of the rulers. Now, one of the key feature attraction is that is be able to stood high above on the highest spot of the fort, overseeing the Jodhpur city, and which I'm going to share with you later on at the later part of my image, where overseeing this not only the city but also the sunset, and before that, there are quite a number of palaces, and each of these palaces are given different names, which also is the main attraction of our visit. But before I go into all these palaces itself interiorly, let's look at all the facade, and all these palaces also have their internal courtyard, and within the courtyard you can see how extravagantly and how impressively the carving work was done, right? And then the decoration was done to all the facade of the building. You can see from all these images. So we are lucky in the sense that because during our visit was actually a sunny day and blue skies, so we are able to get some pretty good images of the exterior of this building, all these palaces. But at the same time, also have a magnificent sunset scenes, which I'm definitely going to share with you. And you can see how the building has been cantilever out, and when you look at the picture on the right is the cantilever portion of a building, whereby the decoration right below it, cantilever. I think look at the image here is easily is about 2 to 3 meter cantilever beyond the building line of the floor below. And when travel these palaces itself, they actually have designated an entry point and exit point because it's firstly, you don't want us to miss out any important section of the museum because there are a lot of artifacts being displayed and a lot of beautiful rooms, right, within that this fort. So we had to follow through a guide path, and as you travel from room to room, palace to palace, then we managed to able to capture some of this beautiful view from the window area, exteriorly and internally. You just look at the architecture profiles, the decoration on all these windows and balconies. And as I say, these forts also have fought many war, and of course they have quite a number of victory over its enemy, and that's how they given names, different name to each of the gates as soon as a victory of war is achieved. And but at the same time, you realize that actually the decorations, the architecture aspect of it of this fort, both exteriorly and internally, cannot be neglected, and that make this fort so famous, even among the tourists over the whole world, as well as among the tourists within India. We are ascending from courtyard to courtyard, moving higher and higher grounds, and finally we landed at a spot that almost not the highest but almost the highest spot of the fort. And in one of the palace balcony, we oversee the city now, the Jodhpur city. And because it's a war been fought, and therefore they have housed, this fort still house many cannons, used cannon in the war, and they are still displacing these cannons. And you can see on the image, this image, they have two cannons was located in these strategic locations, right? And you still found many other cannons located elsewhere between this palace or fort. This is one of the interior courtyards, and before we enter to the building proper, I mean the interior of this palace, I would like to share with you there are a few very important palaces that you must visit during your travel to this Mehrangrah Fort. Basically, is three of it I can name it. Recommended is Moti Mahal, which is also known as the Pearl Palace, the Pui Mahal, also known as Flower Palace, and the Shisha Mahal is also known as Mirror Palace, and also two other less important, less famous palaces, which namely Sile Khana as well as Dalat Khana. Right? Altogether, I have recommended 5 palaces that you must visit when you come to this fort. Some are rather the facade are different slightly from the earlier what we've seen. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, that some of this expansion of construction of these new palaces was added on by different ruler over time. So it's expected to have slight architecture style differences. Okay, so you can see that actually the almost every corner of this all those palace buildings are all intricate really intricately decorated. And this clearly shown that the cantilever portion of the balcony. Just look at the facade, the picture on the right, on the screen they put on the windows. And I believe this portion of the palace or in the fort, this section are fairly new compared with the earlier images we have seen, and less intricately but more plain and simple. And finally, we landed at the highest spot of this fort, and there have more displays of cannons. And at this place, you will going to have a very good panoramic view of the Jodhpur city, the blue city of Rajasthan. He got his name Blue City because the houses in these cities or the buildings in this city are mostly painted in blue in colors. We'll see some of the images later on. And this fort also housed a temple. And these temples happen to be situated at the outermost edge of the fort, overseeing the Jodhpur city. And this temple is known as the Mataji Temple, or sometimes they also known as Chamunda Mata Temples. And this goddess was brought over by the founder of this fort, right, from Madras in 1460 after this fort was completed. Here you can see the bluish color of the Jodhpur city below. Remember, at this point we are 125 meters above the city. And you can find these very famous cannons, Kila cannons. And also you can see the city view, bluish in colors. And they give you an even closer view, a better view of how tall is it, this palace, and also this fort. When we stood above it, and when we stood at this point, we looked down. You can see the high wall spanning from the hill all the way up to the point where we stood. So imagine that with this style of construction itself, how could the enemy able to conquer these forts during the earlier time, whereby there's no aeroplanes or thing of that sort. So therefore, all the warfare is fought by human beings using ladders, elephants, and all that shot, arrows, and so on. Definitely, I think this fort is one of the best defense for the king, for the Raja. And finally, the evening sun set in. We are there still the late evenings, and taking behind a cannons, and the bluish colors of the city has covered almost the entire city. This is a fort that extends all the way to the end of it, where the temple is located. And this temple painted in white stand out from these images. Also can be viewed from far from the city below. The sun finally going to say goodbye to us, and it's gone. Time for the blue hours, the twin light zones, and time for us to leave. So light start turn on certain places. In fact, we have to leave soon. The gate will be closed for visitor. And this is the, I mentioned earlier, the interior of the palaces. So this is one of the area where the king, the Raja, meet his officer or guests. And this is the mirror palace. From the decoration, need to explain. And this is another section of the palace. It's very interesting, and we already spent a lot of time looking at it. So the only regret is that I did not take enough images, close-up images of this, because we are also quite rushed. Given half a day, but we also quite rushed because we need to get out to take our setting sun, prepare for the setting sun. That's what you saw just now in my earlier image. Of course, there is a museum, a Palestine museum, so you also will expect to find some exhibits, collections. These are artifacts, and this artifact or collection will include even weapons, right, and miniature item, musical instruments, and many other things. And one of them is actually the palanquin, or we call them the wheelless vehicle carried by men. This is a source used by the kings, and it is some of the displays. And in one section, as outside the palace, but still within the fort, we found this lady selling drinking water. What attracted me is actually the container they used to contain the waters. And we also can find some traditional musicians performing. And the visitor, both local and also from abroad, they tend to have a habit of dressing in a local costume and to take picture. Particularly, you found that this lady in red is from mainland China, the tourist from mainland China, and she rented this and put it on and to take pictures for the entire tour of this fort. And that's end about this number fort I've shared with you. I'm going to share with you the last fort of India, also in the state of Rajasthan, the coming Saturdays. Thanks you for those who stay until this hour with me, and I hope you have a good days. And I believe that for those Chinese, we are going to celebrating a Chinese festival, and Dongzhi. So basically, it's coming Sundays. I wish you happy Dongzhi, happy Holy Festival. And for those Christians, I know that Christmas around the corner too. We will share with you another fort, and that's where before we see you in the next Saturdays, I also wish you Merry Christmas. So please stay tuned to my channels, because by the end of this month, after I completed my sharing my travelogues to this gigantic and outstanding fort of Rajasthan, I'm going to move on to another nation, a new nation, a nation that attract many people's attentions, both good and bad. That is actually the China. And I cover, China is just a large country, and I'm going to cover a province. This province is Xinjiang. I'm going to bring you to southern Xinjiang of China in the beginning of 2021. So please stay tuned to my travelogues for a next nation to come in the year of 2021 January. See you and bye. Please take care. Thank you very much for staying until these hours.